and welcome to episode 56, and today we're out and about having a look at the difference between using dedicated video camera with video lenses and using DSLRs. I have to say, cards on the table, I don't use DSLRs for video. I use DSLRs with nice lenses for stills, but I prefer to use ordinary video cameras with sort of broadcast style ENG lenses. But I've been down to the Broads and I've taken a Canon EOS 1200D, which is a very basic Canon camera with a Sigma 50 to 500mm lens, and I've pointed them at some goings on the water. So we've got the Norfolk Broads for anyone who's not been around here. But the first pictures are what's been taken with the Canon, and I'm going to move across now to the JVC 750. It's a 3-inch chip camera. It's got a stock Canon KT 14x4.4 stock lens on it, and the 14x zoom on that is nice. It's servo operation, so you can have very slow movements, you can have very fast movements, and I quite like the images that these cameras collect. I've got 3 of them I think at the moment, and I've got a range of lenses for them, so I thought it was worthwhile just having a look at the sort of pictures you get out of a stock camera with a stock lens on the front. So we're going to have a look at the range of the KT 14x4.4 stock lens, starting at the wide angle setting, and we're going to go in to the end of the travel, which will be on this little boat that's abandoned and moored at the side of a development that's gone horribly wrong. Imagine putting 2.2 million quid into an investment to build houses next door to the Broads and then discovering the land's full of asbestos. That's a bit of a snag, isn't it? But this is the Canon 14x zoom at its longest setting, and I think the images that it's creating is quite nice. The JVC gives some really nice colour rendition in my opinion. It's not excessive, it's nice, and it's pretty accurate. Now we've switched over to the DSLR. Now there's a few things to notice immediately. The range of zoom you can see here, of course, is a manual, and the big problem that's pretty obvious on the screen is that vibration is a bit of a snag. Now, it's not just vibration of the long, heavy lens on the tripod that's doing this. When you use the zoom on here, you have to grab hold of it, and it's a fairly hefty lens to zoom in, so you need a reasonable amount of force to turn that zoom ring, and I've found it practically impossible to do that smoothly. And while you're trying to turn it, of course, you jog the camera. Back to the JVC. And now we go back to the Canon again. I think the Canon colours are different. There's quite a big difference in the colours on them. The reds in particular on the Canon seem to be a little bit more vivid. All these images you're looking at today are with no adjustment, and they're on automatic, so automatic exposure and no tweaking and playing with colour balances and things like that. It's exactly as the camera does. This is the camera on full automatic. Now I thought I'd try an experiment as well. I've still got some B4 mount lenses, and with an adapter they fit on the front of the 750. Now this is plainly a pretty shocking picture. It's washed out, it's weak, it's not particularly sharp, but this particular lens, the Fujinon A14, is a B4 lens, which means it's meant for a much bigger sensor. So we're actually only seeing the 1/3 JVC chip. So we're seeing the central image, and the central image of course will be less sharp anyway. But the other thing of course is that this is an SD lens. We use it on an HD camera, and it's soft. There's a lot of chromatic aberration. If you look to the top left hand corner of that screen where that white cruiser is, the edges of it are very weird. it does have a 2x converter, and the 2x converter is in at the moment, so it gives you a heck of a lot more reach. I mean, you can see on full zoom in that we are now, you can actually just see those 3 sections of the rail on the boat. Now that's much closer in, but I'm not convinced that the sharpness and quality of the picture make it particularly usable. It might be a sort of get you out of trouble type lens, and with the adapter it fits on perfectly well. You get reasonable depth of field with it, but we're pushing it too hard. I'd struggle to be able to use that type of picture. In sort of noise terms it's fine, but it's just soft. Nothing is particularly sharp, and we've got strange fuzzy edges on quite a lot of the sort of areas where light goes against dark, as in the water running across the left hand side. Now if we switch out the 2x converter, things get much better. So this is the same lens, so it's a 14x zoom with the adapter, but the 2x converter switched out, and it's sharpened up quite nicely. Without that 2x converter, I think I could get away with this as an emergency, although that's now only slightly further in than the lens that we normally use on the camera, so we can get a little bit further in with this by virtue of that crop, but not a great deal. So this is the wide angle shot with our Canon KT14 stock lens. This is the Fujinon XT17 by 4.5. It's an alternative lens that was offered with the JVC package when the cameras were being sold, and it's just a slightly better lens than the Canon, and I think it's got a little bit more contrast to it as well, I think. Now I'm zooming from the wide angle right through to its maximum zoom, and consider how smooth it is. That's not too bad at all. If we swap it for the Canon camera, so we're now on the DSLR, if we do the same thing on the Canon with the Sigma lens, because it's a manual zoom, we've got a little bit of wobble from where I'm having to actually touch the camera, but I'm also having to grasp that zoom ring fairly hard. Now, it's a very heavy lens, and the zoom in and out is not particularly smooth, and it could certainly be a lot better than it is. But because what actually happens when you turn that zoom ring is that the front section of the lens emerges from the housing and it actually physically gets longer. That means there's an awful lot more resistance, and it wobbles. I can't really say it any more simply than that. When you use the zoom on that Sigma, it's rubbish for video. It just isn't possible to sort of zoom in and then zoom out smoothly. It just can't do it. Now that the lens, after all, is made for taking still pictures, and it's really great being able to go from wide to really zoomed in with a sort of big hefty twist of that zoom ring. But that's not good for video. So in actual fact, it's a nice lens. The camera takes nice pictures, but it's just not particularly practical for video. Back to the JVC with the alternative lens. I think this is my favourite lens for this particular camera. The wide angle that I've also got in the studio is a useful lens. It doesn't have quite so much zoom range, but it's usefully wider. The Fujinon, the one we're looking at the moment, I quite like, and the standard lens, the Canon, is not bad. I certainly wouldn't worry about which was which if I had to choose. They seem to match quite nicely. What do you think? Was there a winner? Are they just different? I tend to think that one thing came out of it that is pretty obvious to me now, and that's the B4 adapters are really just not worth doing. SD lenses, HD cameras, small chip size cameras, B4 mount. Should have worked. It was a bit depressing really, and the extra reach that I'd hoped to get out of that 2x just with the soft picture just doesn't really work. DSLRs versus ordinary cameras. For me, I'm sticking with these JVC 750s. I like them, I like the images. I particularly like lenses that do what you want them to do. So slow creeps, fast zooms, lenses that stay in focus, that's good enough for me. I understand why people like DSLRs, but with my glasses, no, they just don't work for me. Image quality, well, I think probably they just look different. I'm not sure they look better, just different. Anyway, that's enough for today, and we'll be back in the studio next time. So look after yourselves, take care, see you soon.